Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Graham Ledger, host of The Daily Ledger on One America News Network.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. Like fruit of the loom, I will be brief. Come on, you're here to hear someone else. I do host a daily political television talk show called The Daily Ledger, named after me, on the One America News Network. I'll tell you a little bit more about that on Saturday when I am up here. Right now, it is my honor and privilege to introduce to you the Governor of the Garden State, the state of New Jersey, the Honorable Christie.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Good to be here. Good to be here. Thank you all for your warm welcome. I want to start off with a story from New Jersey. A few years ago, our pension fund and our public employee health benefit fund together was over $130 billion in debt. And we put together a plan to do the things that they should be doing here in Washington, D.C. on entitlements. Raise the retirement age, end cost of living adjustments, more penalties for early retirement, and more money being put into the system by the people who are actually benefiting from it. And after we proposed this, you can imagine that I was extraordinarily popular with the public employee unions. And so we decided to do what we do in New Jersey, not to go to the Chamber of Commerce and have a lunch. I decided to go to the New Jersey Firefighters Convention. Went to the Firefighters Convention, and I was introduced, and it was significantly a longer walk to the stage than it was up here. And that entire time, I was being bathed in the love of the public employee unions. When I got up to the stage, the person running the convention said, "Governor, I'm sorry for the reception." I said, no. I came to the podium like this, and I said, as they were booing the hell out of me, I said, "Come on, you can do better than that. Let's go." And they did. And then I said to them, I had a prepared remarks to make, and I took them, and I tore them up, and I threw it at the side of the stage. And I said to them, here's the thing. I understand that you're angry, and I understand that you feel deceived, and I understand why you're booing. The only thing I don't understand is why you're booing the first person to ever come here and told you the truth. The truth is that if we don't change these pensions, you're not going to collect them. That's the truth. And the fact is that for each and every one of you, you may hate me now, but 10 years from now, after I've made the changes that need to be made and you're collecting your pension, you'll be looking for my address on the internet to send me a thank you note for saving the retirement for you and your families. The amazing thing that happened was that after I was done with those remarks, and I ended 6 minutes, 7 minutes, tops, I walked off the stage and 2/3 of the audience was cheering. Here's the reason why and what I want to talk to you about this morning. The fact is, we've got to start talking about what we're for and not what we're against. And the reason for that is very, very simple. And it's exactly what I said to CPAC in Chicago in 2012. The reason we have to start talking about what we're for and not continuing to rail against what we're against is because of one simple reason. Our ideas are better than their ideas, and that's what we have to stand up for. And if you need any further example of that, just look at what's going on in terms of what they're for in Washington, D.C. What they're for in Washington, D.C. is to have the leader of the Senate Democrats stand up and rail against two American entrepreneurs who have built a business, created jobs, and created wealth and philanthropy in this country. Harry Reid should get back to work and stop picking on great Americans who are creating great things in our country. And that's typical. It's typical of the contrast between what's happening with governors and what's happening in Washington. And there are lots of examples that I could tell you about, and I am going to tell you about. Governors are about getting things done. Governors are about making government work and keeping government out of people's lives as much as they can. And we've got lots of examples of it. Look at what's happened in Wisconsin with my friend Governor Scott Walker. Scott Walker stood up for collective bargaining reform, and you know what's happened to the teachers union in Wisconsin? Their membership is down 60% because Scott Walker made it voluntary to join the union in Wisconsin. People are voting with their feet. In Ohio, John Kasich stood up against the crazy ideas the Democrats had in Ohio that was causing economic depression in that state. And what you have now in Ohio, because of John Kasich, is lower taxes and more jobs and an unemployment rate that's lower than the national average. That's getting things done in a state like Ohio with John Kasich. How about Michigan? How about Michigan, where Governor Rick Snyder has made Michigan the home of the UAW, a right-to-work state. And in Florida, Rick Scott has taken an unemployment rate that he inherited well over 11% and brought it to under the national average, and because of free market conservative ideas, has created over 450,000 new private sector jobs in 3 years in Florida. That's because governors, Republican governors across this country, have stood up and done things, not just talked about them. And what you see in Washington is people who only want to talk. They can't stop talking. The most dangerous 10 feet in Washington, D.C. is between anybody who wants to start talking and a camera. This is what they're about. And you can see it an example not only with the dysfunction in Congress, but one story that I love about the president. You remember when they set up this whole super committee thing, right? Way back when they were trying to resolve the budget problems and all the rest. They set up a super committee, and after the super committee got nothing done, what did the White House say? The White House said the president never met with the super committee or got involved with them because he knew they were doomed to failure. Man, that's leadership, isn't it? You're the leader of the government. You see something getting ready to go off the rails, and what you decide to do is stay as far away from it as possible. Well, my question now is the same question I had then. If that's your attitude, Mr. President, what the hell are we paying you for? Leadership is about getting in and getting something done and making government work. Leadership is not about standing on the sidelines and spitballing. And that's all we see all across Washington, D.C., but it's not what we see in the states. Here's another thing we've got to stop doing. We have to stop letting the media define who we are and what we stand for. Because when we talk about what we're for, no matter what state we're in, our ideas win. Look at what we've done in New Jersey, a state that Barack Obama won by 17 points in 2012. Today, the fiscal year 2015 budget I proposed just a week ago has $2.2 billion less in discretionary spending than the state was spending in 2008. Now, if you had said that a blue state would do something like that, you would have said we were crazy. But we continue to talk about our ideas that government needs to be smaller. We have 6,000 fewer state employees in New Jersey today than the day I was sworn in as governor. For the first time in 105 years, teacher tenure has been reformed so that we can finally have accountability in the classroom. Teachers who teach stay, teachers who don't go. And when they said it could never be done, now twice, for the first time since Roe versus Wade, New Jersey has elected a pro-life governor of New Jersey. And this is what I mean about the media. I got asked a question last year. Hey, Governor, you're very popular in a blue state. How can you export that to the rest of the country given the intolerance on social issues in your party? And I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, you say the Republicans are intolerant. Well, I'll just tell you this. At our national convention, we've had people like Tom Ridge and Colin Powell and Condi Rice speak at our national conventions, even though our party platform and I don't agree with their position on abortion. Tell me, sir, the last pro-life Democrat who was allowed to speak at a Democratic convention. I said, and by the way, don't strain yourself because there's never been one. They're the party of intolerance, not us. The fact is that we have to take these guys on directly. And you know I'm shy and retiring, and I don't like to speak my mind, especially regarding the media. But, you know, what we need to start saying is that we're not going to put up any longer with them defining who we are. But the way we have to define ourselves is say what we're for. So when we say that we're pro-life and that we're proudly pro-life, that doesn't mean we're pro-life just when that human being is in the womb. We need to be pro-life when they leave the womb as well, for every step of their lives. And what's that mean? It means we have to be in favor of an educational system that's accountable so that child, as they grow, can have a world-class education. It means that we have to be in favor of a society that creates opportunity and jobs for them, not one that has the government control what they think is good or fair in our society. And it means when those children fall victim to disease, a disease like drug rehabilitation, we need to rehabilitate those kids because every life is precious. Every life is precious no matter where they are in society. We need to make that difference. So when we say we're proudly pro-life, we have to be pro-life throughout their entire lives, not just through parts. And when we say that we want to make a difference in our society, we need to make a difference through the type of free market reforms that have always worked in our country. And we don't need, Mr. President, your opinion on what income inequality is. We don't have an income inequality problem. We have an opportunity inequality problem in this country because government's trying to control the private market. You know, in the end, we have the type of people in state houses throughout this country who can make a real difference in our country's future. But we have to stay focused on the task at hand. You see, as I travel around the country as the chairman of the Republican governors, what I feel more than anything else is a frustration in our country with everyone who believes that government no longer works for them, that government just works for itself. And we need leaders now who are willing to say not only that we are against Obamacare, which we are, we need leaders that are not only going to say that we're against higher taxes, which we are, we're against a bigger government, we're against more intrusion into our constitutional rights, we're against all those things, but we need to also talk about what we're for. We need to talk about the fact that we are for a free market society that allows your effort and your ingenuity to determine your success, not the cold, hard hand of government determining winners and losers, which is what this administration has been all about. And we need to make sure that we say we are for America being a leader in the world, and we are for a strong national defense, not one that allows other countries to run us over all over the world. When other people around the world struggling for freedom used to look to America, they looked to an America that was an example for them as to how a free and open society could govern itself. After the last number of years of dysfunction in Washington, D.C. and lack of leadership in the White House, those folks are finding it harder now to look at an America that they want to emulate. An America that's governing itself effectively and providing to its people a safe and civilized society. If we want to once again lead the world, it's not just about the might of our arms. It is about us making ourselves once again an example about how a free, open society that craves and treasures liberty over all else can govern itself in an effective and functioning way. We're not doing that. And we're not the only losers. The rest of the world loses if we don't do that. And so what I think we need to go out and charge out of this conference to do over the course of 2014 is to keep the House of Representatives, win back the United States Senate, win more Republican governorships, and show people that Republicans know what we stand for and we know how to get things done in this country and to lead the world again. But to do that, I'll remind you of just one simple truth in this democracy. We don't get to govern if we don't win. And it's not only bad when we don't get to govern because we don't get to mold and change our society. What's worse is they do. And they're doing it to us right now. So please, let us come out here resolved not only to stand for our principles, but let's come out of this conference resolved to win elections again. That's what I intend to do for the next year, and I hope you'll join me. Thank you very much.
I'm Justin Pierce, and when I'm at the state capitol and I need to relax, I take a guitar off of my wall and I sit and strum for a little while. I have 5 children, and they are the absolute love of my life. They are why I do what I do. We're in a legislative committee, and the issue of abortion was being discussed, and we had people that came to testify and said, special needs children can be a burden on people. And I turned a picture around on my computer, I showed it to everybody, and I said, this is my nephew Brent. And this is the kid who you've basically been saying we shouldn't have to burden ourselves with. My senior year of high school, I did a project in my government class on the national debt, and I was blown away at how much debt we had as a country. It was $4 trillion. Taxation without representation. That's my kids. They are going to have to pay for what we have done to them. And it's immoral, it's not fair, it's unethical. It's incumbent on us to stand strong. If we don't do this, then who will?
Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Justin Pierce, Arizona State Representative and Top 10 Under 40 honoree.
Thank you. Greetings from the Grand Canyon State. I can't tell you how excited, there they are. I can't tell you how excited I am to be here at CPAC today speaking to you. I went to elementary school in Yuma, Arizona at the Ronald Reagan Fundamental School. And that's important. I know it's a little cliche for Republicans to invoke the name of President Reagan in our speeches sometimes, but I have to tell you, I am a Republican today, a conservative Republican, because President Reagan was the leader of the 80s, of my generation. So I want to take you back to the 80s. The year was 1986, January of 1986. You may remember that President Reagan was set to give the State of the Union address, but something happened that morning. The Space Shuttle Challenger blew up shortly after takeoff. Actually, one of the 6th grade teachers in my elementary school was one of the semifinalists for that Teacher in Space program that claimed the life of Krista McAuliffe, the school teacher, and 6 other brave astronauts that morning. So that evening, President Reagan addressed the country from the Oval Office instead of doing the State of the Union address. This was the first national disaster, tragedy in my memory. And I remember specifically he had a message that he directed to the school children of America because he knew that we had been watching or listening that morning. And he said something very important. And in only a way that President Reagan could say it, he said, I know it is hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. As one of the school children to whom President Reagan directed his message that evening, I felt comforted and I was inspired that we could move forward with confidence even in the wake of a great tragedy. President Reagan had a special ability to inspire people that way. Now, I believe that if we as conservatives use our message to inspire, we can help people see the potential within themselves. And frankly, at its core, isn't that the message of conservatism? We believe in personal responsibility not because we like to see people suffer, although the left would like you to believe that. We know that personal responsibility raises the individual and makes them better. Instead of letting the left convince people that we want to shrink government because we don't want essential services in our communities, that's crazy. That's not our message. Our message is that limited government reduces the burdens on individuals and provides a promise to the private sector that it can flourish and thrive, and that's what helps our communities. And there's been a lot of talk about this one today, but the left wants to continue to make you believe, make the country believe, that we're not concerned about people's health care. And nothing could be further from the truth. Frankly, what we care about is that the government get out of healthcare because individuals do not want government managing their healthcare. Period. Since I've invoked the name of President Reagan, I might say that he might have said about this debate that government is not the solution to our health care problem. Government is the problem. Thank you. You know, I mentioned at the beginning of my message today I was in the 5th grade at the Ronald Reagan Fundamental School when that tragedy happened. I want to tell you about another 5th grader, and it was in 2012, my son Jake. The morning after the 2012 election, Jake was sitting at our breakfast table, and I asked him if he had heard about the news from the previous evening about the election. And he had followed it fairly closely. He was a pretty big fan of Mitt Romney. I almost said President Romney, by the way. Wouldn't that have been great? My son looked sad. I knew he was disappointed. He told me he'd heard the results and he went back to his homework. I have to tell you, my heart ached at that point. I knew that he was disappointed. I knew he was concerned about his future. I was concerned about his future. But as a lot of the messages I think that we've heard today are, that was not a time for me to commiserate with him. So I didn't commiserate with him. It was a time for me to inspire him. So I went up behind him and I put my hands on his shoulders and I told him, among other things, I said, "Don't you worry, son. You're going to have the future that you deserve." And I felt confident saying that to him because I know that there are people like you all around this country, like people in this room, who will stand up for the values that make this country great and that will provide the future that my kids deserve and that your kids deserve. Like President Reagan's message to me as a young school child in 1986, the future still does not belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. But the problem is, over the last 6 years, all we've been told from this administration is that it's enough to hope. The country's been sold on the word hope. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm done hoping. I'm done waiting. I'm ready to inspire. And I know that we can do that. And I know when we inspire this country, we will do great things. I ask you to join me and the other conservative leaders that you've heard in inspiring this country to go forward. Thank you. God bless you. And may God bless this wonderful United States of America.